They called me a retired war hero playing dress-up, until armed terrorists crashed my wedding reception and I had to choose between my white dress and saving a senator's life. What happened next turned my perfect day into the most classified mission of my career. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast golden rays across the sprawling gardens of Cliffside Gardens Resort, where the Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly beyond manicured lawns and pristine white gazebos. It was supposed to be the perfect day. After 8 years of military service in 3 different combat zones, Sergeant Aria Viper Kane was finally trading her tactical gear for a wedding dress, her calloused hands for delicate lace gloves, and her radio call sign for the simple title of Mrs. Reid. Aria stood before the full-length mirror in the bridal suite, studying her reflection with the same analytical precision she'd once used to assess hostile territory. The ivory silk gown hugged her athletic frame, carefully concealing the network of scars that told the story of her service. A small one near her collarbone from shrapnel in Afghanistan, another along her left shoulder from a knife fight in Syria. The wedding makeup artist had done an exceptional job covering the faint marks, but Aria could still see them. She always could. "You look absolutely radiant," her mother, Grace Kane, said from behind her, adjusting the delicate pearl necklace that had belonged to Aria's grandmother. Grace's eyes were bright with tears of joy, but also tinged with relief. For years, she'd worried her daughter would never make it home from one of those deployments. Now, watching Aria prepare for the happiest day of her life, Grace felt like she could finally breathe again. Through the window, Aria could see the wedding guests beginning to arrive. Lucas Reid, her groom and the love of her life, had insisted on a large celebration, despite Aria's preference for something more intimate. As a successful tech entrepreneur who'd never served in the military, Lucas wanted to honor Aria's service by inviting her entire former unit along with his extensive network of business associates and family friends. The guest list had created an interesting dynamic. On one side were Aria's fellow veterans, men and women who understood the weight of what she'd carried overseas. On the other were Lucas's colleagues and friends, successful civilians who viewed military service through the lens of Hollywood movies and patriotic rhetoric, but had never experienced the reality of combat. Then there were the active duty military personnel. Lucas had thought it would be meaningful to invite several officers from the nearby Marine base, including Captain Brett Sullivan, who'd served in the same theater as Aria, but had never worked directly with her unit. Sullivan was everything the Marine Corps loved to showcase. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a chest full of ribbons, and the kind of commanding presence that looked perfect in recruitment videos. As Aria made final adjustments to her dress, she could hear voices drifting up from the courtyard below. She recognized Sullivan's booming laugh immediately, followed by the voice of Lieutenant Alex "Sledge" Murphy, another active duty officer who'd been invited. "Hard to believe Viper's hanging up her boots for good, though I guess after 8 years she's earned her retirement." "Retirement?" Sullivan's tone carried a note of condescension that made Aria's jaw tighten slightly. "She's what, 29? Most of us are just hitting our stride at that age, but I suppose not everyone's cut out for the long haul." Aria forced herself to focus on her reflection, reminding herself that today was about celebration, not confrontation. She had dealt with attitudes like Sullivan's throughout her career. Some people couldn't accept that a woman had earned her reputation through competence rather than luck or lowered standards. Others viewed anyone who left active duty as somehow lesser, unable to handle the demands of continued service. The truth was more complex. Aria had left the military not because she couldn't handle it, but because she had accomplished everything she had set out to do. 3 successful tours, 2 Bronze Stars, and a reputation among Special Operations Command that earned her the call sign Viper for her ability to strike with precision when least expected. She had trained indigenous forces, led reconnaissance missions deep behind enemy lines, and extracted high-value targets from situations that other units couldn't handle.
But she'd also watched too many friends come home in flag-draped coffins. She'd carried the weight of decisions that saved some lives while inevitably costing others. When Lucas had proposed, offering her a chance at a normal life filled with quiet mornings and predictable days, she'd said yes, without hesitation. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," Aria called, expecting to see her maid of honor. Instead, Sergeant First Class Kai Nakamura entered, resplendent in his dress blues. Kai had served alongside Aria during her final deployment, and their friendship had been forged in the crucible of combat operations that most people would never understand. Unlike the active duty officers downstairs, Kai knew exactly what Aria was capable of. "You ready for this, Viper?" he asked with a grin, using her old callsign with the familiarity of someone who'd trusted his life to her tactical decisions. "As ready as anyone can be for civilian life," Aria replied, smoothing down her skirt. "Though I have to admit, this dress is a lot harder to move in than my gear." Kai laughed. "Well, let's hope you won't need to do any tactical maneuvering today. This is supposed to be the boring kind of day, remember?" Through the window, they could see more guests arriving. A black sedan with tinted windows caught Aria's attention for a moment. Something about it seemed out of place among the luxury cars and SUVs driven by the other guests, but she dismissed the thought. Today was her wedding day. The only mission she needed to focus on was walking down that aisle and saying, "I do." "I should get downstairs," Kai said, checking his watch. "Lucas looked pretty nervous when I saw him an hour ago. Might need some moral support." After Kai left, Aria spent a few more minutes alone with her thoughts. In 2 hours, she would officially become Mrs. Lucas Reid. Her military identification would be replaced by a civilian driver's license. Her tactical call sign would give way to pet names and endearments. The transformation felt surreal, like stepping into someone else's life. Her radio training kept drawing her attention to sounds outside. The catering staff moved with professional efficiency, but their movements seemed more coordinated than necessary. The security team Lucas had hired appeared competent, but they were focused on keeping overeager photographers at bay, not on legitimate threats. Why would there be legitimate threats at a wedding? Aria shook her head, forcing herself to relax. This was exactly the kind of hyper-vigilance that had made her so effective in combat zones, but it had no place at her wedding. She was safe. Her guests were safe. The biggest challenge she'd face today was remembering not to trip over her train during the processional. A gentle knock at the door interrupted her thoughts once again. "Aria, sweetheart," Grace's voice called through the door. "It's time." Aria took one final look in the mirror. The woman staring back at her looked like a fairy tale princess, all silk and lace and delicate beauty. But beneath the wedding dress, Aria could still feel the coiled strength in her muscles, the instinctive awareness of exits and potential threats, the mental catalog of improvised weapons that could be fashioned from seemingly innocent objects. Old habits died hard, but today, she told herself, they could die quietly. She opened the door and smiled at her mother. "Let's go get me married." As they walked toward the staircase that would lead to the garden ceremony, Aria felt a strange mixture of excitement and melancholy. She was closing one chapter of her life and opening another. The warrior was becoming a wife. Staff Sergeant Viper Kane was transforming into Mrs. Aria Reid. She had no way of knowing that in less than 3 hours, she would need every skill she'd ever learned as a soldier. The perfect wedding day was about to become the most dangerous mission of her life.
The garden ceremony had gone off without a hitch. Aria and Lucas had exchanged vows beneath a white wooden archway adorned with cascading roses and baby's breath, while 200 guests looked on with tears of joy and appreciation. The Pacific Ocean provided a stunning backdrop, its waves gently lapping against the cliffs below as seabirds wheeled overhead in the afternoon sunshine. Now, as the cocktail hour commenced on the resort's expansive terrace, Aria found herself navigating a social minefield that felt almost as treacherous as the combat zones she'd left behind. The reception was scheduled to begin in an hour,
giving guests time to mingle, enjoy hors d'oeuvres, and share stories about the happy couple. Captain Brett Sullivan stood near the bar, holding court with a group of younger officers and several of Lucas's business associates. His dress uniform was immaculate, every ribbon and medal positioned with mathematical precision. When he spoke, his voice carried the kind of authority that commanded attention from everyone within earshot. The thing about modern warfare, Sullivan was saying, gesturing with his champagne flute, is that it requires a certain psychological resilience that not everyone possesses. Combat isn't about following a checklist or completing a training exercise. It's about making life or death decisions under pressure that would break most people. Aria approached the group slowly, hoping to simply grab a glass of water and move on to speak with her family members. But Sullivan's next words stopped her in her tracks. Take Sergeant Kane here. Solid enough soldier, I'm sure, but 8 years isn't really long enough to understand the full complexity of military operations. Most of us are just getting started at that point. Lieutenant Murphy nodded in agreement. Plus, let's be honest, the standards for women in combat roles, well, they're not exactly the same as what we face. Different physical requirements, different expectations. It's not their fault, it's just biology. One of Lucas's college friends, a software engineer named Brad, who'd never served a day in uniform, looked uncomfortable. But didn't she serve in Afghanistan and Syria? That sounds pretty intense. Sullivan laughed dismissively. Sure, she was deployed to those regions, but being deployed and being in actual combat are two different things. Most support personnel never see real action. They stay on base, handle logistics, maybe do some convoy escort duty. It's important work, don't get me wrong, but it's not the same as leading men into battle. Aria felt her jaw clench involuntarily. She'd been in more firefights than Sullivan would see in his entire career, had made tactical decisions that saved dozens of lives, and earned her Bronze Stars through actions that most soldiers would consider extraordinary. But correcting him publicly would only confirm their preconceptions about women being emotional and unable to handle criticism. Instead, she stepped forward with a polite smile. Excuse me, gentlemen. I just wanted to thank you all for coming to celebrate with us today. The group turned toward her with varying expressions of surprise and embarrassment. Sullivan recovered first, his military bearing automatic even in social situations. Congratulations, Sergeant Kane. Beautiful ceremony. You make a lovely bride. Thank you, Captain Sullivan. I hope you're enjoying the reception. Absolutely. Great venue choice. Must be nice to have this kind of celebration after... He paused, as if searching for the right words. After the stress of military life? I imagine civilian life will be much more relaxing for you. The implication was clear. Military life had been too demanding for her, and she was retreating to easier circumstances. Aria maintained her smile, though her fingers tightened slightly around her water glass. Different challenges, certainly, but I'm looking forward to new adventures with Lucas. Murphy stepped forward with the kind of patronizing smile she'd seen 1,000 times before. That's the smart move, honestly, knowing you've reached your limits. Not everyone's cut out for a full military career. 20 years is a long time.
I'm sure Sergeant Kane served with distinction, Sullivan said carefully. All I'm saying is that 8 years gives you a certain perspective, but it takes longer to really understand the bigger picture of military strategy and leadership. Ethan Cooper, Lucas's best man and business partner, had been listening to the conversation with growing discomfort. As someone who'd known Aria for 3 years, he'd heard enough stories from Lucas to understand that she was far from the retiring support soldier Sullivan was describing. Aria never really talks about her service, Ethan said, trying to diffuse the tension. But from what Lucas has told me, she was involved in some pretty significant operations. Sullivan's smile became slightly condescending. I'm sure she was. Every deployment has its stories, but there's a difference between participating in operations and leading them. Command responsibility is something that develops over time, with experience. Speaking of command responsibility, Murphy added, I heard you're completely done with the military, Sergeant Kane. No reserves, no consulting, nothing. Most of us can't imagine walking away entirely. The implication stung. That she was abandoning her duty
taking the easy way out while others continued to serve? Aria had heard variations of this argument before, usually from people who'd never been tested the way she had. "I fulfilled my commitment," she said simply. "Now I'm starting a new chapter." "Of course," Sullivan nodded magnanimously. "Everyone has to make their own choices. Some people are lifers. Others prefer to dabble and move on to civilian careers. Both have their place." The word dabble hit like a slap. 8 years of combat deployments, of split-second decisions under fire, of leading missions that saved American lives, reduced to dabbling? Aria felt her pulse quicken, the familiar surge of adrenaline that preceded action. But this wasn't a combat zone. This was her wedding reception, surrounded by friends and family who expected her to be gracious and accommodating. Starting a confrontation would only confirm their assumptions about women being unable to control their emotions under pressure. "Well," she said with forced lightness, "I should go check on the other guests. Thank you again for coming." As she walked away, she heard Murphy's voice drop to what he probably thought was a whisper. "Seems like she's got some anger issues. Probably for the best that she's out of the service." Aria continued walking, her training keeping her posture straight and her expression calm. But inside, she felt the familiar burn of injustice that had followed her throughout her military career. No matter what she accomplished, no matter how many times she proved herself, there would always be people who saw her gender first and her competence second. She made her way to the far end of the terrace, where her mother was chatting with several elderly relatives. Grace looked up as Aria approached, immediately noting the tension in her daughter's shoulders. "Everything all right, sweetheart?" "Perfect," Aria replied, forcing a smile. "Just wedding day nerves." But as she gazed out over the peaceful ocean vista, Aria couldn't shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong. Her tactical instincts, honed by years of staying alive in dangerous places, were sending subtle warning signals that she couldn't quite identify. The catering staff moved with military precision that seemed excessive for a wedding. The security team Lucas had hired appeared competent, but focused on the wrong threats. And that black sedan she had noticed earlier was still parked in the guest lot, its inhabitants nowhere to be seen among the wedding guests. Aria told herself she was being paranoid. This was her wedding day, not a combat zone. The most dangerous thing she'd have to handle was navigating family politics and ensuring the reception ran smoothly. She had no way of knowing that in less than an hour, Captain Sullivan's dismissive assumptions about her capabilities would be put to the ultimate test.
The reception dinner had just concluded with heartfelt toasts and emotional speeches that left most guests wiping away tears of joy. Lucas had spoken beautifully about finding his perfect partner in Aria, while Kai's best man speech had struck the perfect balance between humor and reverence for their friendship forged in combat. Even Captain Sullivan had applauded politely, though his expressions suggested he found the military references overly dramatic. Aria stood near the head table, accepting congratulations from a steady stream of guests. Her grandmother's pearl necklace caught the light from the elegant chandeliers that had been strung between the oak trees, creating a magical atmosphere as twilight settled over the coastal venue. The string quartet was preparing for the first dance, and everything felt perfectly orchestrated. That's when she noticed Major Diane Razor Thompson approaching through the crowd. Razor had been Aria's commanding officer during her final deployment, a no-nonsense, career military woman who'd earned her callsign by cutting through bureaucratic red tape with surgical precision. Seeing her here was a complete surprise. Aria had sent her an invitation out of courtesy, but Razor had declined months ago, citing operational commitments. More concerning was Razor's expression. Despite wearing civilian clothes and a polite smile, her eyes held the kind of focused intensity that Aria recognized from mission briefings. Something was very wrong. "Congratulations, Viper," Razor said warmly, embracing Aria like any other wedding guest. But as she pulled away, she whispered, barely audibly, "We need to talk. Now. Smile and act normal." Aria's pulse quickened, but her expression remained serene.
Years of training had taught her to compartmentalize, to maintain operational security even when every instinct screamed danger. She laughed as if Razor had shared a funny story, then gestured toward the mansion. "Let me show you the gardens," Aria said loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "The sunset view from the rose garden is absolutely breathtaking." They walked casually through the reception area, Aria stopping briefly to thank guests and accept more congratulations. To any observer, they looked like old friends catching up at a wedding. But Aria's tactical awareness was now fully engaged, noting exit routes, potential weapons, and the positioning of security personnel. Once they reached the secluded rose garden, Razor's demeanor shifted completely. The friendly wedding guest disappeared, replaced by the hard-edged intelligence officer Aria remembered. Senator Rebecca Hayes was kidnapped 3 hours ago, taken from her hotel in Monterey by a professional team. Initial intelligence suggests foreign operatives, possibly Russian or Eastern European based on their methodology. Aria felt the familiar chill that preceded combat operations. Senator Hayes was the chairwoman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, privy to classified information that could compromise ongoing operations worldwide. Her kidnapping wasn't just a crime, it was a national security crisis. "What's the operational status?" Aria asked, her mind automatically shifting into tactical mode. "FBI hostage rescue team is mobilizing, but they're 2 hours out minimum. Local law enforcement is establishing perimeters, but these aren't ordinary criminals. They've got military-grade equipment and tactical sophistication that suggests state sponsorship." "Why are you here? Why now?" Razor's expression grew grim. "Because we have intelligence indicating the kidnappers are heading for a safe house in Redwood Canyon, less than 20 miles from this location. And because—" She paused, clearly uncomfortable with what she had to say next. "Because we need someone with your specific skill set to assist in the extraction." Aria stared at her former commanding officer, processing the implications. "You're asking me to abandon my wedding reception to participate in an active hostage rescue operation? I'm asking the best reconnaissance and extraction specialist I've ever worked with to help save a United States senator whose kidnapping could compromise national security for decades." The weight of the request settled on Aria's shoulders, like familiar gear. She glanced back toward the reception, where she could see Lucas laughing with his college friends, completely unaware that his new wife was being recruited for what could be the most dangerous mission of her career. "There are other qualified operators available," Aria said, though even as she spoke, she knew she was grasping for alternatives. "Not with your combination of regional knowledge and extraction expertise. You trained in those mountains, Viper. You know every trail, every tactical advantage, every potential ambush point. The FBI team is flying in blind."
Through the garden paths, Aria could see the reception continuing in blissful ignorance. The band had started playing, and couples were beginning to dance on the outdoor platform that had been constructed for the occasion. Captain Sullivan was holding court near the bar, probably sharing more stories about real military leadership. "This is my wedding day," Aria said quietly. "I know, and I wouldn't be here if we had any other option." Aria closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the crushing weight of duty warring with personal desire. She'd served her country for 8 years, had made sacrifices that most people couldn't imagine. Tonight was supposed to be about her future with Lucas, about building a life beyond the demands of national service. But Senator Hayes was out there somewhere, probably terrified, possibly being tortured for information that could get other Americans killed. And Aria knew, with absolute certainty, that she had the skills to help bring her home safely. "What's the timeline?" she asked. "Kidnappers were spotted 90 minutes ago, heading northeast. If they reach their safe house and establish defensive positions, this becomes exponentially more difficult. We need to intercept them before they go to ground." Aria looked down at her wedding dress, at the delicate lace and silk that represented everything she'd hoped civilian life could be. Peaceful, predictable, safe. Then she thought about Senator Hayes, alone and afraid, depending on professionals like her to bring her home safely. "I need 10 minutes to change clothes and brief Lucas." Razor nodded grimly. "There's more, Viper. The kidnapping team? They're the same cell we've been tracking for 18 months. The ones responsible for the embassy attack in Prague. Aria's blood ran cold. She remembered Prague. 3 Americans killed, including a young intelligence analyst who'd been younger than Aria was now. If the same team had Senator Hayes, they wouldn't hesitate to kill her if cornered. Equipment? Full tactical gear in my vehicle. We'll rendezvous with FBI teams at the staging area. As they walked back toward the reception, Aria's mind was already shifting into operational mode. She calculated distances, analyzed terrain, considered tactical approaches. But part of her was also breaking apart, watching her perfect wedding day dissolve into another mission, another crisis that demanded everything she had to give. Lucas was going to be devastated. Her family would be confused and worried. The guests would wonder what kind of emergency could pull a bride away from her own reception. But none of that mattered compared to the life of a United States senator and the national security implications of her kidnapping. "One more thing," Razor said as they approached the mansion. The FBI team leader specifically requested that no local military personnel be involved. He's concerned about operational security. Meaning? Meaning Captain Sullivan and his friends can't know about this. As far as anyone here is concerned, you're dealing with a family emergency. Aria almost smiled, despite the gravity of the situation. Sullivan would never know that the retired soldier he'd been dismissing all evening was about to undertake a mission that would require every skill he claimed she didn't possess. As they reached the terrace where the reception continued in full swing, Aria took one last look at the celebration that was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. In a few minutes, she would trade her wedding dress for tactical gear, her peaceful evening for potentially deadly confrontation. The irony wasn't lost on her. For years, she'd proven herself in combat zones around the world, only to be dismissed by people like Sullivan who couldn't see past their prejudices. Tonight, while he danced and told stories about military leadership, she would demonstrate the kind of courage and competence that he claimed to value but couldn't recognize when it stood right in front of him. Lucas spotted her approaching and waved, his face radiant with happiness. Aria's heart broke a little more with each step toward him, knowing that in a few minutes she would have to shatter his perfect evening to answer the call of duty one more time. "Lucas, I need to speak with you privately," Aria said, her voice carefully controlled despite the urgency coursing through her veins. Her new husband looked slightly puzzled, but followed her toward a quiet alcove near the mansion's library, away from the music and laughter of their reception. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately, recognizing the tension in her shoulders that she couldn't quite hide. "You look like you did that night when you got the call about your unit being deployed early." Aria took his hands in hers, the weight of her grandmother's wedding ring feeling heavier than any tactical gear she'd ever worn. "There's been a situation. A senator has been kidnapped, and they need my help with the rescue operation." Lucas stared at her for several long seconds, processing words that seemed impossible on their wedding day. "They need your help? Aria, you're retired. You're a civilian now. We just got married 3 hours ago." "I know, but no." His voice was firm, but not angry, filled more with protective concern than frustration. "You served your country for 8 years. You've done enough. Let someone else handle this." Before Aria could respond, Captain Sullivan's voice carried across the terrace as he regaled another group with military stories. His words drifted clearly through the evening air. "The problem with short-term service members is they never develop the institutional knowledge necessary for complex operations. They learn the basics, sure, but real expertise takes decades to develop." Aria's jaw tightened as she heard Lieutenant Murphy's responding laugh. "Exactly, which is why when serious situations arise, you need people with actual command experience, not someone who spent a few years following orders and thinks they understand strategy." Lucas followed her gaze toward the group and immediately understood the additional layer of frustration she was feeling. "Aria, forget about those idiots. This is about us, about our future together. Whatever's happening, there are other qualified people who can handle it. The kidnappers are heading for terrain I know better than anyone. Redwood Canyon.
I spent 6 months training there, mapping every trail, every potential ambush point. The FBI team is flying in blind. Then brief them. Give them your maps, your knowledge. You don't have to personally participate in a hostage rescue on your wedding day. From across the terrace, she could hear Razor's voice as she spoke with several guests, maintaining her cover as a wedding attendee while steadily gathering information about local security and potential evacuation routes. Every minute they delayed increased the chances that the kidnappers would reach their safe house and establish defensive positions. Ethan Cooper approached their secluded alcove, concern evident on his face. Everything okay? People are starting to ask about the first dance. Family emergency. We just need a few minutes. Ethan nodded and retreated, but not before Aria caught the worry in his expression. Soon, other guests would start asking questions, wondering why the bride and groom had disappeared during their own reception. I have to do this, Aria said finally. Senator Hayes chairs the Intelligence Committee. If they extract classified information from her, it could compromise operations worldwide. American lives could be lost. And what about my life? What about the life we're supposed to start together? I've already spent 3 years worrying every time your phone rang, wondering if you were being deployed again. We were supposed to be done with that. Aria felt tears threatening, but forced them back. She learned long ago that emotions were a luxury she couldn't afford during operational planning. This is different. This is one mission, not a deployment. I'll be back before midnight. That's what you said about that reconnaissance mission in Syria that turned into a 3-week ordeal. Before she could respond, Captain Sullivan's group had moved closer to their alcove, his voice now clearly audible as he continued his impromptu lecture on military leadership. The thing about extraction operations, Sullivan was saying with the confidence of someone briefing junior officers, is that they require split-second decision-making under extreme pressure. You need operators with extensive experience in hostile territory, people who've been tested in multiple combat scenarios. It's not the kind of mission you trust to someone with limited field experience. Lieutenant Murphy nodded sagely. Absolutely. Hostage rescue is the most demanding type of operation we conduct. One wrong decision, one moment of hesitation, and people die. You need proven leaders, not people who've spent their careers in support roles. Aria's hands clenched into fists before she consciously relaxed them. The irony was almost overwhelming. While Sullivan pontificated about the qualifications needed for exactly the type of mission she was being asked to join, he remained completely oblivious to her actual capabilities. "You see," Lucas said, noticing her reaction to Sullivan's comments, "even your fellow officers don't think you're qualified for this type of operation. Maybe that's a sign that you should let someone else handle it." "Lucas, Sullivan doesn't know anything about my actual service record. He's making assumptions based on his years of experience and training," Lucas interrupted. "Aria, I love you, but maybe it's time to acknowledge that there are some missions that require different skill sets than what you developed during your service." The words hit harder than any enemy fire she'd ever faced. Her own husband, the man who just promised to support her through everything, was echoing the same dismissive assumptions that had followed her throughout her career. "I led 17 successful extraction operations," she said quietly. "I've extracted high-value targets from situations that other units couldn't handle. I've never lost a hostage." "In support roles," Lucas said gently, clearly trying not to hurt her feelings while still making his point. "You followed orders from more experienced commanders. This situation sounds like it needs someone who can take charge, make command decisions under pressure." From the terrace, Sullivan's voice continued. "Command presence is something you're either born with or develop over decades of leadership experience. It's not something you can learn from a few years of deployment rotations." Aria stared at her husband, seeing in his eyes the same well-meaning condescension she'd encountered countless times throughout her military career. Even Lucas, who loved her and had supported her service, couldn't truly comprehend what she'd accomplished or what she was capable of achieving. "I need to change clothes," she said finally, her voice emotionally flat. "Lucas, please don't do this. Stay here with me. Let the FBI handle it.
Let the people who are trained for this type of operation. I am trained for this type of operation, she interrupted, her professional mask sliding back into place. More trained than anyone else who's currently available. She turned and walked toward the mansion, leaving Lucas standing alone in the alcove. As she passed Sullivan's group, she caught fragments of his ongoing lecture about tactical leadership and the importance of extensive field experience in complex operations. None of them noticed as she slipped inside to change from her wedding dress into the tactical gear that Razor had provided. They were too busy discussing theoretical scenarios to recognize that a real operation was unfolding right in front of them. In the mansion's guest bathroom, Aria carefully removed her grandmother's pearls and folded her wedding dress with the same methodical precision she'd once packed her combat gear. The ivory silk gave way to black tactical clothing, body armor, and equipment harnesses that fit her like a second skin. When she looked in the mirror, the bride was gone. In her place stood Staff Sergeant Viper Kane, ready for the most important mission of her career. The same woman that Captain Sullivan and his colleagues had spent the evening dismissing as unqualified for serious military operations. Outside, she could hear the reception continuing, her absence now noticed by guests who assumed she was simply taking care of last-minute wedding details. None of them suspected that she was preparing to undertake exactly the type of high-stakes extraction operation that Sullivan claimed required years of specialized experience. As she secured her tactical radio and checked her equipment, Aria felt the familiar calm that preceded dangerous missions. Personal emotions had to be compartmentalized. The mission came first. Always. Senator Hayes was depending on her, even if she didn't know it yet. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. Please don't do this. I love you, but I can't watch you walk back into that world. Aria stared at the message for a long moment, then powered down the phone and slipped it into her tactical vest. There would be time for personal relationships later. Right now, she had a senator to save and a reputation to uphold, even if the people who doubted her capabilities would never know what she'd accomplished in the darkness beyond their reception lights.
20 minutes later, Aria crouched behind a granite outcropping in Redwood Canyon, her night vision goggles revealing the kidnappers' convoy stopped at a makeshift checkpoint 200 meters below. Through her tactical radio, she could hear the chaos unfolding as the FBI's hastily assembled rescue operation fell apart in real time. "Alpha Team, report your position," came the stressed voice of FBI's Special Agent Marcus Webb, the operation commander who'd insisted on maintaining federal jurisdiction despite having no familiarity with the terrain. "We're pinned down on the North Ridge," responded Agent Sarah Chen, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Unknown number of hostiles with automatic weapons. We've got 2 agents wounded and can't advance without taking heavy casualties." Aria had predicted this exact scenario during the brief operational planning session at the staging area. The FBI team had approached the canyon using standard urban tactical procedures, treating the mountainous terrain like a city block, rather than the complex, 3-dimensional battle space it actually was. When she tried to explain the tactical disadvantages of their planned approach route, Agent Webb had dismissed her input with the same patronizing tone she'd heard all evening at her reception. "Thank you for the local knowledge, Sergeant Kane," Webb had said, barely glancing at the detailed terrain maps she'd sketched from memory. "But we've got this handled. FBI hostage rescue team has successfully completed over 300 extraction operations. We know what we're doing." Now, listening to his agents trapped in a crossfire that could have been avoided, Aria felt the familiar frustration of watching professionals make predictable mistakes because they couldn't see past their institutional arrogance. "Bravo team, can you provide covering fire for Alpha's withdrawal?" Webb's voice cracked slightly as he transmitted the order. "Negative. We're taking effective fire from elevated positions. Whoever these guys are, they know exactly what they're doing." Aria adjusted her position slightly, using her scope to identify the enemy firing positions that the FBI teams couldn't see from their compromised locations. The kidnappers had chosen their defensive positions with military precision, utilizing natural terrain features to create overlapping fields of fire that made any frontal assault suicidal.
Through her earpiece, she heard Major Thompson's voice on the command frequency. Webb, what's your status? We're running out of time here. Situation is more complex than anticipated. Enemy has superior tactical positioning and appears to have military-grade equipment. We may need to call for air support. Air support? Thompson's voice carried a note of disbelief. In a hostage situation, with Senator Hayes potentially in the middle of your target area? Kay'd her radio on the tactical frequency that bypassed Webb's command channel. Razor, this is Viper. Request permission to provide tactical assessment. Thompson's response was immediate. Go ahead, Viper. FBI teams are advancing along predictable routes that enemy forces have obviously prepared for. They're taking fire from concealed positions on elevation points that I identified during mission planning. Current approach is resulting in unnecessary casualties with zero probability of successful hostage extraction. There was a pause before Thompson responded. Webb, are you monitoring this frequency? I'm monitoring, and I don't appreciate having my tactical decisions second-guessed by someone who's not even part of this operation. Sergeant Kane has more extraction experience than your entire team combined. Maybe you should consider listening to her recommendations. With all due respect, Major, federal jurisdiction means federal command authority. We don't need advice from retired personnel who are not familiar with current FBI protocols. Aria watched through her scope as another FBI agent went down, struck by sniper fire from a position she'd specifically warned them about. The wounded agent's screams carried clearly through the canyon, adding urgency to an operation that was rapidly spiraling out of control. Razor, this is Viper. Enemy sniper positions are exactly where I predicted. Alpha Team is exposed on open ground with no covered withdrawal route. If they don't move in the next 60 seconds, we're going to have multiple KIA. Webb, did you copy that? Thompson demanded.
I copied, Webb responded tersely. Alpha Team, initiate withdrawal to secondary positions. We can't move, Agent Chen's voice was strained with pain and fear. Anyone who breaks cover is getting cut down immediately. Through her night vision, Aria could see the tactical situation with crystal clarity. The FBI agents were trapped in a natural kill zone, pinned down by disciplined enemy fire from positions that offered perfect concealment and overlapping coverage. Without immediate intervention, the entire rescue operation would end in disaster. Webb, you need to abort this approach and reposition, Aria transmitted directly. The enemy has you exactly where they want you. I don't take tactical advice from retired support personnel, Webb snapped back. We're federal agents conducting a federal operation. Aria felt her jaw clench at the support personnel comment. Even now, with his operation falling apart and his agents in mortal danger, Webb couldn't acknowledge that she might possess relevant expertise. Bravo Team, advance to provide covering fire for Alpha's withdrawal, Webb ordered, apparently determined to solve the problem through brute force rather than tactical adaptation. Sir, we advance on that route, we're going to walk into the same trap Alpha did, the Bravo Team leader responded. Those are your orders. Execute immediately. Aria watched in mounting horror as 6 FBI agents began moving along exactly the route she'd warned against during planning. The kidnappers had obviously anticipated this movement because concentrated fire erupted from multiple positions as soon as the agents exposed themselves. Contact! Contact! Screamed the Bravo Team leader as his units scattered for inadequate cover. We're taking heavy fire from multiple directions. The operation was now a complete disaster. 12 FBI agents were pinned down in 2 separate locations, taking casualties from enemy forces who held all the tactical advantages. Senator Hayes remained in enemy hands, and every minute of continued fighting reduced the chances of extracting her alive. This is Agent Webb, came the strained transmission. I'm calling for immediate reinforcement from local SWAT units and requesting military air support. Webb, you can't call in airstrikes on a hostage situation, Thompson's voice carried both anger and disbelief. I'm not requesting strikes, I'm requesting reconnaissance and suppressive fire to break enemy contact. Aria keyed her radio with growing urgency. Razor, if they bring in helicopters without coordinated ground movement, enemy forces will either execute the hostage or use her as human shield. This needs to be resolved with precision, not overwhelming force. Agent Webb, Thompson's voice was deadly serious. I'm strongly recommending you accept tactical consultation from Sergeant Kane before the situation deteriorates further. Negative. FBI maintains operational control. We don't need guidance from someone whose military experience doesn't translate to domestic hostage rescue. That final dismissal broke something inside Aria's professional restraint. She'd watched too many good people die because commanders refused to acknowledge expertise that came from unexpected sources. Senator Hayes was depending on professionals to save her life, and those professionals were failing because of institutional pride and gender-based assumptions. Razor, request permission to intervene, Aria transmitted. There was a long pause before Thompson responded. Viper, you're not officially part of this operation. Ma'am, with respect, 12 federal agents are about to die, and Senator Hayes will be executed if someone doesn't fix the situation right now. Another pause, then Thompson's voice came back with resigned determination. Viper, you have tactical authority to provide emergency assistance to federal agents under fire. Use your discretion. Agent Webb's voice exploded over the radio. I'm ordering all personnel to maintain current positions and await reinforcement. Any unauthorized movement will result in federal charges. Aria switched off her radio and began moving toward the trapped FBI agents. Webb could threaten her with federal charges later. Right now, she had lives to save and a mission to complete. The same people who'd spent the evening questioning her qualifications were about to discover exactly what 8 years of special operations experience could accomplish when applied with precision and purpose. The retired support personnel was about to show them how real tactical leadership worked.
Preparing and narrating the story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Aria moved through the darkness with the fluid precision of someone who'd spent years perfecting the art of invisible warfare. Her night vision goggles revealed every rock, every tree, every potential cover position as she approached the trapped Alpha team from an angle that the enemy forces hadn't anticipated. The FBI agents were huddled behind a fallen log that provided minimal protection from the sustained automatic weapons fire raking their position. Agent Chen was applying pressure to a wounded teammate's shoulder, while another agent returned sporadic fire at muzzle flashes they couldn't effectively target. Alpha Team, this is Viper, Aria whispered into her tactical radio, using a frequency she knew the kidnappers wouldn't be monitoring. I'm approaching your 6 o'clock position. Do not fire in my direction. Who the hell is Viper? Agent Chen responded, her voice tight with stress and confusion. The retired support personnel who's about to save your lives, Aria replied dryly. Stay low and be ready to move on my signal. She reached the log line and slid into position beside Agent Chen, her appearance causing several FBI agents to stare in shock. Here was a woman in full tactical gear, moving with professional competence through a firefight that had trapped 12 federal agents. How did you get here without taking fire? Chen asked, impressed despite the circumstances. Same way I'm going to get you out, Aria replied, quickly assessing the wounded agent's condition. Shoulder wound, through and through, no arterial damage, he'll live if we move him soon. Through her scope, she identified 3 enemy positions that were maintaining suppressive fire on the trapped agents. The kidnappers were disciplined and well-trained, but they'd made the mistake of establishing a predictable pattern of fire that someone with her experience could exploit. Agent Webb, this is Kane, she transmitted on the command frequency. I'm with Alpha Team. Request permission to coordinate their extraction. Negative. Webb's response was immediate and furious. You're not authorized to participate in this operation. I'm ordering you to withdraw immediately. Aria ignored him and keyed her radio to speak directly with Major Thompson. Razor, this is Viper. Current tactical situation requires immediate action to prevent multiple casualties. Request authorization to assume tactical command of rescue operation. You don't have the authority to assume command of a federal operation, Webb interjected before Thompson could respond. Agent Webb, Thompson's voice carried the unmistakable tone of a career military officer who'd reached the end of her patience. Your operation has resulted in multiple wounded agents and 0 progress toward hostage extraction. I'm recommending you accept assistance from someone who actually knows what they're doing. I don't take recommendations from military personnel who have no jurisdiction in domestic operations. Aria ignored Webb and keyed her radio to address the trapped agents directly. All Alpha Team personnel, listen carefully. In 60 seconds, I'm going to suppress the 3 enemy positions that are pinning you down. When I do, you'll have a narrow window to move to better cover. Follow Agent Chen, move fast, and stay low. Wait, shouldn't we coordinate this through command? One of the agents protested. Command has been coordinating for the last 30 minutes, Aria replied, checking her equipment. How's that working out for you? Agent Chen looked around at her wounded teammates and made a command decision. We'll follow your lead. Aria positioned herself at the edge of the log line and began identifying targets through her scope. The enemy positions were well concealed, but they'd been firing from the same locations long enough for her to track their muzzle flashes and movement patterns. Razor, this is Viper. Beginning tactical intervention in 30 seconds. Viper, you're not authorized, Webb began. Webb, shut up, Thompson interrupted. Viper, you have my authorization. Execute your plan. Aria didn't wait for further discussion. She'd identified the enemy sniper who was causing the most problems for the trapped agents, a skilled marksman positioned in a rocky outcropping that provided excellent concealment and field of fire. Her first shot took him out cleanly, disrupting the coordinated fire pattern that had kept the FBI agents pinned down.
Immediately, she shifted to the second position, where an automatic weapons team was providing suppressive fire. 2 quick shots neutralized both gunners before they could adjust to the new threat. Alpha Team, move now, she ordered. Agent Chen led her team in a disciplined withdrawal to a more defensible position, carrying their wounded teammate while Aria provided covering fire that kept the remaining enemy forces from interfering with their movement. How the hell did you do that? Chen gasped as they reached safety behind a granite boulder formation that offered superior protection. Training and experience, Aria replied, already scanning for the next tactical opportunity, something your command structure apparently doesn't value. Over the radio, she could hear Webb's voice becoming increasingly shrill as he tried to regain control of an operation that had moved beyond his ability to manage. All units, maintain current positions and await my orders. Any agent who moves without authorization will face disciplinary action. Agent Chen looked at Aria with a mixture of respect and disbelief. Are you really going to ignore direct orders from the operation commander? I'm going to save Senator Hayes and get your people home alive. If Webb wants to court-martial me afterward, he's welcome to try. She switched to the frequency monitoring Bravo team, who were still trapped in their own untenable position. Bravo team, this is Viper. Report your status. We've got 2 wounded and are taking sustained fire from at least 4 positions. We can't move without taking casualties. Understood. Stand by for tactical support. Through her scope, Aria could see the building where Senator Hayes was being held. The kidnappers had positioned their defensive forces to protect against conventional assault approaches, but they hadn't anticipated someone with her combination of reconnaissance skills and tactical expertise. Razor, this is Viper. I can reach the target building, but I need someone to coordinate extraction once I locate the hostage. Webb is the operation commander, Thompson replied carefully. Webb's operation has failed. He's got 12 agents pinned down and no plan for reaching the objective. I need someone who can make command decisions based on tactical reality, not bureaucratic protocol. There was a pause before Thompson responded. Viper, you have tactical authority to execute hostage extraction. I'll coordinate support elements. Negative, Webb's voice erupted over the radio. I'm the senior federal agent on scene. No one moves without my authorization. Aria keyed her radio with growing impatience. Webb, while you've been arguing about authority, the kidnappers have had 30 minutes to fortify their positions and potentially harm the hostage. Every minute we delay increases the risk to Senator Hayes. I don't need tactical lectures from someone who's been out of the military for 6 months. Agent Chen, who'd been listening to the radio exchanges while treating her wounded teammate, looked at Aria with new understanding. You're really not retired support personnel, are you? I'm exactly what this situation requires, someone who puts mission success ahead of ego. She began moving through the darkness toward the building where Senator Hayes was being held, leaving behind the chaos of competing command structures and wounded federal agents. Behind her, she could hear Webb still arguing with Thompson about jurisdictional authority, while his agents remained trapped under enemy fire. The woman who'd been dismissed as a diversity hire at her own wedding reception was about to demonstrate exactly what 8 years of special operations experience could accomplish when applied with precision and purpose. While others argued about who had the right to lead, she was simply going to get the job done. Senator Hayes was counting on her, even if she didn't know it yet. And Aria had never failed a mission when American lives hung in the balance. The real extraction operation was about to begin.
Aria approached the target building with the methodical precision of someone who'd spent years perfecting the art of invisible penetration. The structure was a converted hunting lodge nestled against the canyon wall, its rustic exterior concealing what intelligence suggested was a fortified safe house used by international criminal organizations. Through her night vision scope, she counted 6 external guards maintaining disciplined watch patterns around the perimeter. These weren't amateur kidnappers or opportunistic criminals. Their movement patterns and equipment suggested military or paramilitary training, the same professional competence that had allowed them to snatch a United States senator from a heavily secured hotel in broad daylight. "Razor, this is Viper," she whispered into her tactical radio. "I have eyes on the objective. Counting 6 external security, professional-grade equipment, and tactics. Recommend we treat this as a state-sponsored operation." "Copy that, Viper. Intel suggests the same cell responsible for the Prague embassy attack. Expect sophisticated countermeasures and willingness to execute hostage if cornered." Through her earpiece, she could still hear Agent Webb's increasingly desperate attempts to regain control of an operation that had moved far beyond his tactical understanding. "All federal units, maintain current positions and await arrival of tactical reinforcements." Webb's voice carried the edge of panic as he tried to impose bureaucratic solutions on a military problem. "No agent is authorized to advance on the objective without my direct order." Aria ignored him and continued her reconnaissance. The building's ground floor showed thermal signatures indicating multiple individuals in what appeared to be a main room. One signature was positioned separately from the others, likely Senator Hayes being held in isolation while her captors maintained security protocols. The kidnappers had chosen their position well. The lodge sat against a steep rock face that eliminated rear approaches, while the front and sides were covered by overlapping fields of fire from concealed positions. Any conventional assault would face withering crossfire from defenders who held every tactical advantage. But Aria had spent 6 months training in this exact terrain, learning to exploit natural features that most people would never notice. A narrow drainage channel ran along the building's eastern wall, providing concealment for someone skilled enough to use it properly. During her training exercises, she'd used that same channel to conduct mock infiltrations that had impressed even veteran special operations instructors. "Viper, this is Alpha Team," came Agent Chen's voice over the radio. "We're observing your movement around the target building. How are you doing this without triggering their security response?" "Training and terrain knowledge," Aria replied quietly, reaching the drainage channel that would provide access to the building's eastern wall. "Something your leadership team should have considered during mission planning." Through her earpiece, she could hear Webb's voice rising to near hysteria as he tried to coordinate reinforcements that wouldn't arrive in time to matter. "Where are those tactical teams? We need air support and armored vehicles. This situation is completely out of control."
Aria slipped into the drainage channel and began moving toward the building's foundation. The narrow space was exactly as she remembered from training exercises, barely wide enough for a single person, but providing complete concealment from anyone not specifically looking for infiltration from that angle. As she reached the building's eastern wall, she could hear voices inside speaking in accented English. Through a partially open window, she caught fragments of conversation that confirmed her worst fears about the professionalism of the kidnapping team. "American agents are incompetent," one voice was saying in what sounded like a Russian accent. "They advance like amateurs into obvious kill zones. This extraction will be simple." "What about the woman?" another voice asked. "She saw our faces during the initial operation." "The Senator will not survive extraction attempt.
We complete primary mission and disappear before reinforcements arrive. Aria felt her blood chill. These weren't ordinary criminals hoping to negotiate a ransom. They were professional operatives with orders to eliminate Senator Hayes rather than risk her rescue. Every minute of delay increased the likelihood that they would execute their primary target and escape into the wilderness. She needed to reach Senator Hayes immediately before the kidnappers decided that the FBI's bungled rescue attempt posed enough threat to justify killing their prisoner. Through the window, she could see the interior layout clearly. Senator Hayes was being held in a back room, secured to a chair, but apparently unharmed. 3 guards maintained watch on her while 2 others monitored the external security situation through communications equipment. The tactical challenge was significant. 5 armed opponents in an enclosed space, with Senator Hayes positioned where stray gunfire could easily kill her during any rescue attempt. This was exactly the type of precision operation that required split-second timing and absolute accuracy. Razor, this is Viper. I have visual on Senator Hayes. She appears unharmed, but is secured in a room with multiple hostiles. Recommend immediate extraction before they decide to execute her. Copy that, Viper. What's your plan? Single operator breaching clear. I'll need you to coordinate distraction on the opposite side of building to draw their attention away from hostage location. Webb won't authorize any coordinated action, Thompson replied grimly. He's still arguing with FBI command about jurisdictional authority. Through her scope, she could see one of the kidnappers checking his watch and speaking urgently to his teammates. Their body language suggested increasing concern about the tactical situation outside. If they decided the rescue attempt posed too much risk, Senator Hayes would be dead within minutes. Razor, I'm going in with or without coordination. These guys are about to execute the hostage. Viper, wait for... Aria switched off her radio and prepared to breach the building. She'd spent 8 years learning that sometimes the difference between success and failure came down to a single person making the right decision at the critical moment. Agent Webb could court-martial her later. Right now, she had a senator to save. Through the window, she could see Senator Hayes looking up with terrified eyes as one of her captors approached with what appeared to be a prepared statement. The execution was about to begin. Aria checked her equipment one final time and prepared to demonstrate exactly what 8 years of special operations training could accomplish when applied with precision and purpose. The woman who'd been dismissed as support personnel was about to conduct the most challenging extraction of her career. Senator Hayes' life depended on her getting this exactly right. And failure had never been an option for Staff Sergeant Viper Kane. Aria moved through the window with the fluid silence of someone who'd spent years perfecting the art of invisible entry. Her tactical boots touched the wooden floor without the slightest sound as she positioned herself in the shadows of the lodge's main room, her weapon ready, and her mind cataloging every detail of the tactical environment. The kidnappers were positioned exactly as she'd observed through her scope. 2 men monitored communications equipment near the front entrance, their attention focused on the chaotic radio chatter from the FBI teams still trapped outside. A 3rd guard maintained watch on the back room where Senator Hayes was being held, while a 4th moved between positions with the restless energy of someone expecting imminent action. Through the partially open door to the back room, Aria could see Senator Hayes sitting upright in a wooden chair, her hands secured behind her back, but her posture defiant despite obvious fear. The senator was younger than Aria had expected, probably in her mid-40s, with the kind of composed bearing that suggested she understood the gravity of her situation but refused to be broken by it. One of the kidnappers was reading from a prepared statement in accented English, apparently recording a video message for later distribution. The American intelligence apparatus has interfered in sovereign operations for the last time, he declared. This individual will pay the price for her government's criminal activities. Aria's blood ran cold as she realized she was witnessing the preparation for Senator Hayes' execution. The kidnappers weren't planning to use her as a bargaining chip. They intended to kill her and broadcast the murder as a propaganda message. Every second of delay brought the senator closer to death. Moving with practiced precision, Aria eliminated the communications operators first, using suppressed shots that dropped both men before they could alert their teammates. The kidnapper monitoring the back room spun toward the sound of falling bodies, his hand reaching for his weapon. Aria's second shot took him center mass before he could draw his sidearm. The fourth kidnapper, positioned near the kitchen area, managed to get his weapon halfway up before her third shot neutralized him with surgical precision. 4 shots, 4 targets eliminated, and the entire engagement had taken less than 10 seconds. The kidnapper in the back room with Senator Hayes was now alone, unaware that his entire team had been neutralized by someone he'd never seen coming. "Drop your weapon and step away from the hostage," Aria commanded as she moved toward the back room, her rifle trained on the final kidnapper's center mass. The man spun toward her voice, his eyes widening in shock as he realized his tactical situation had changed completely. In his hand was a pistol pointed at Senator Hayes' head, his finger tense on the trigger. "American woman? You are not FBI. I'm the person who's going to kill you if you don't drop that weapon immediately," Aria replied with a flat certainty of someone who'd made similar promises before and kept them. Senator Hayes looked up at her rescuer with a mixture of relief and amazement. "Are you military?" "Staff Sergeant Kane, United States Army. I'm here to bring you home, ma'am." The kidnapper's eyes darted between Aria and his hostage, calculating odds and options. "You kill me, I kill her first. We both die, but mission is completed." "Wrong," Aria said calmly. "You're about 3 seconds away from joining your teammates on the floor. The only question is whether you do it with a bullet in your head or a bullet in your shoulder. Your choice." Through her earpiece, she could hear Agent Webb's voice becoming increasingly frantic as he tried to coordinate reinforcements that were still minutes away. "Where are those tactical teams? We need immediate support at the objective building." The kidnapper's hand was shaking slightly as he maintained his aim at Senator Hayes' head. Aria could see the calculation in his eyes, weighing his chances of completing his mission against the certainty of death that her presence represented. "You cannot save her," he said finally. "Even if you kill me, my associates will complete the operation. American senator dies tonight." "Your associates are dead," Aria informed him matter-of-factly. "I counted 4 external guards and neutralized them before entering the building. Your communications team is down. You're alone, outgunned, and out of options." The kidnapper's eyes showed the first signs of genuine fear as he processed the tactical reality of his situation. A single operator had infiltrated his secured position, eliminated his entire team, and now stood ready to kill him if he made any aggressive movement.
"This is impossible," he muttered. "FBI agents are incompetent. They cannot—" "I'm not FBI," Aria interrupted. "I'm someone who actually knows what they're doing." Senator Hayes spoke up from her chair, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "Sergeant, how many agents are outside?" 12 FBI agents, ma'am, currently pinned down by your friend's defensive positions. They're having some tactical difficulties." "Meaning?" "Meaning they approach this like a domestic law enforcement operation instead of a military extraction. Predictable results." The kidnapper was sweating now, his weapon wavering slightly as stress affected his fine motor control. Aria recognized the signs of someone whose tactical situation had deteriorated beyond their ability to manage. "Last chance," she said quietly. "Drop the weapon and step away from the senator. Do it now." "I have orders," the kidnapper replied, but his voice lacked conviction. "So do I, and mine involve bringing Senator Hayes home alive while making sure people like you understand the consequences of targeting American officials." For a moment, the standoff continued with deadly tension. Then the kidnapper made his choice, trying to swing his pistol toward Aria while maintaining his threat to the hostage. Aria's shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him away from Senator Hayes and sending his weapon flying across the room. Before he could recover, her second shot disabled his other arm, leaving him writhing on the floor, but alive for interrogation. "Target secured," she announced into her radio. "1 hostage recovered, multiple hostile KIA, 1 prisoner for intelligence purposes." Agent Webb's voice erupted over the communications channel. "Who authorized you to assault the objective? I specifically ordered all personnel to maintain current positions." "Webb, shut up," Major Thompson's voice cut through his protests. "Viper, what's the status of Senator Hayes?"
Unharmed but secured to furniture. Request immediate medical evaluation and secured transport to base. Aria moved quickly to free Senator Hayes from her restraints, using a tactical knife to cut through the rope securing her hands. The senator rubbed her wrists gratefully, then looked up at her rescuer with obvious respect. "Sergeant Kane, I don't know how you got here or who sent you, but thank you. That man was about to execute me." "Yes, ma'am. We monitored their communications. This was never a kidnapping for ransom." "How did you manage what 12 FBI agents couldn't?" asked Senator Hayes as they prepared to move toward the exit. "Different training, different approach," Aria replied simply. "Sometimes the job requires someone who's been tested in situations that can't be simulated in training exercises." Through the radio, she could hear Agent Webb still arguing with Major Thompson about jurisdictional authority and unauthorized actions. His operation had failed completely, requiring intervention from someone he'd dismissed as unqualified, and he apparently couldn't accept the implications of that reality. "Viper, this is Alpha Team," came Agent Chen's voice. "We're observing multiple FBI vehicles approaching your position. Looks like Webb's reinforcements finally arrived." "Copy that. Senator Hayes and I will be exiting through the eastern drainage channel to avoid potential crossfire." As they moved toward the window, Senator Hayes looked back at the neutralized kidnapping team. "You did all this alone?" "Training and preparation, ma'am. And maybe a little motivation from people who spent the evening telling me I wasn't qualified for this type of operation." Senator Hayes smiled grimly as they prepared to exit the building. "I have a feeling those people are going to be very surprised when they learn what actually happened here tonight." Aria helped Senator Hayes through the window, then followed her into the drainage channel that would provide concealment during their movement to safety. Behind them, the lodge that had been an impregnable fortress 30 minutes ago now stood empty except for the evidence of what a single, skilled operator could accomplish when applied with precision and purpose. The woman who'd been dismissed as support personnel had just completed the most successful hostage extraction of the entire operation.
30 minutes later, the staging area buzzed with controlled chaos as FBI reinforcements, military personnel, and medical teams processed the aftermath of what would later be classified as one of the most successful counterterrorism operations in recent history. Emergency floodlights illuminated the command post where Agent Webb stood arguing with his supervisors, while Major Thompson coordinated the intelligence gathering from captured materials. Aria sat on the cowgate of an ambulance, still wearing her tactical gear, but finally allowing the adrenaline to fade from her system. Senator Hayes had been transported to a secure medical facility for evaluation, but not before spending 20 minutes debriefing intelligence officers about her captivity and the information her kidnappers had been seeking. Agent Chen approached with 2 cups of coffee and expression of profound respect that was still tinged with disbelief. "I brought you something to drink," she said, settling beside Aria on the tailgate. "Though I'm pretty sure you could have completed this mission without sleeping for 3 days." "Thanks," Aria replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "How are your wounded teammates?" "Both stable. Martinez took shrapnel to the leg. Williams has a through-and-through shoulder wound. They'll be fine." Chen paused, studying Aria's profile in the harsh lighting. "They'll be fine because you got us out of that kill zone when our leadership couldn't." Through the staging area, they could see Agent Webb gesticulating wildly as he tried to explain to his supervisors how a single, retired support personnel had accomplished what his entire tactical team had failed to achieve. His voice carried clearly across the night air, filled with defensiveness and barely contained frustration. "I don't understand how this happened," Webb was saying to a stern-faced woman who appeared to be his superior. "Our intelligence was solid, our tactical approach was textbook, our personnel were fully qualified. Some rogue operator shows up, and suddenly everyone acts like we were incompetent." The supervisor, Deputy Director Sarah Martinez, looked up from a preliminary report with an expression that suggested Webb's career was about to take a significant turn for the worse. "Agent Webb, according to multiple witness statements, Sergeant Kane warned you specifically about the tactical deficiencies in your approach. You dismissed her input and proceeded with a plan that resulted in multiple casualties and 0 progress toward the objective." "She's not even FBI," Webb protested. "She has no experience with domestic hostage rescue protocols."
She has more combat extraction experience than your entire team combined, Director Martinez replied coldly. And while you were arguing about jurisdictional authority, she was saving Senator Hayes' life. Agent Chen turned to Aria with curiosity. What exactly was your military specialty? Because what I saw tonight wasn't typical infantry training. Special operations, reconnaissance, and extraction, Aria replied simply. 17 successful hostage recoveries across 3 different theaters. Tonight was number 18. 18? Chen's eyes widened. Jesus! And Webb kept calling you support personnel? People see what they want to see, Aria said, watching as Major Thompson approached their position with an expression that mixed pride with exhaustion. Viper, Thompson said as she reached them, I need you to debrief intelligence officers about the operational techniques those kidnappers were using. They want to understand how a cell that sophisticated ended up underestimating a single operator. They didn't underestimate me, Aria corrected. They correctly assessed the FBI team's capabilities and planned accordingly. They just didn't know I was here. Thompson smiled grimly. Speaking of which, there are some people who want to talk with you about tonight's performance. She gestured toward a black sedan that had arrived during the medical evacuations. 2 individuals in expensive suits were standing beside it, their bearing and equipment suggesting federal agencies with longer acronyms and higher classification levels than the FBI. CIA? Agent Chen asked quietly. Among others, Thompson replied. Seems like tonight's operation demonstrated some capabilities that certain people find very interesting. Before Aria could respond, Captain Sullivan appeared at the edge of the staging area, his dress uniform now wrinkled and his earlier confidence completely absent. He'd apparently driven from the wedding reception after hearing radio chatter about a major federal operation in progress. Sergeant Kane? He called out, his voice uncertain. I heard there was some kind of incident. Are you injured? Aria stood slowly, her tactical gear a stark contrast to Sullivan's dress military attire. No injuries, Captain. Mission accomplished. Sullivan's eyes moved from her equipment to the obvious signs of recent combat activity around the staging area. Mission? What mission? I thought you were retired. I am retired. Tonight was a special circumstance.
Agent Chen stepped forward with barely concealed satisfaction. Captain, Sergeant Kane just completed a single operator hostage extraction that saved Senator Hayes' life. She neutralized 6 hostile combatants and accomplished what 12 federal agents couldn't. Sullivan stared at Aria as if seeing her for the first time. You conducted a hostage rescue? Tonight? But you were at your wedding reception. Things change, Aria said simply. Lieutenant Murphy appeared beside Sullivan, apparently having followed him from the reception. His earlier smugness had been replaced by confused embarrassment as he processed the tactical evidence surrounding them. I don't understand, Murphy said. How did you end up involved in a federal operation? Someone needed to be here who actually knew what they were doing, Agent Chen replied before Aria could respond. Your colleague spent the evening telling everyone that Sergeant Kane wasn't qualified for serious military operations. Turns out she was more qualified than all of us combined. The uncomfortable silence that followed was broken by Director Martinez approaching their group. Sergeant Kane, I need to personally thank you for tonight's actions. Senator Hayes specifically requested that I convey her gratitude for your professionalism under extremely dangerous circumstances. Just doing my job, ma'am. Actually, Martinez continued, you weren't doing your job, you were doing our job, better than we did it, while we were making mistakes that could have gotten people killed. Sullivan and Murphy exchanged glances, clearly processing the implications of what they were hearing. The woman they'd spent the evening dismissing as an unqualified diversity hire had just received personal commendation from a senior FBI official for conducting a successful counterterrorism operation. There's something else, Thompson said, producing a folder that she handed to Aria. This came through while you were debriefing. Official recall to active duty effective immediately. Special assignment to a joint task force that handles situations like tonight. Aria stared at the orders, processing the implications. Ma'am, I'm supposed to be starting civilian life. I got married 3 hours ago. I know, Thompson replied gently, but sometimes the job finds you, whether you're looking for it or not. Agent Chen looked between the orders and Aria's expression. What does this mean?
It means, Director Martinez interjected, that Sergeant Kane's unique combination of skills has been recognized at the highest levels of government. Tonight's operation demonstrated capabilities that our current personnel structure can't replicate. Sullivan finally found his voice. Sergeant Kane, I owe you an apology. A significant apology. Everything I said tonight about your qualifications was based on assumptions rather than evidence. It happens. No, Sullivan said firmly, it was based on prejudice and arrogance. I spent the evening lecturing people about military leadership while you were demonstrating what real leadership looks like. Lieutenant Murphy nodded in agreement, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by obvious respect. Ma'am, I was completely wrong about your service record and capabilities. What you accomplished tonight was what needed to be done, Aria replied simply. As the staging area began to wind down its operations, Aria found herself facing a choice she'd never expected to make on her wedding day. Return to civilian life with Lucas and the peaceful future they'd planned, or accept recall to active duty for missions that would put her unique skills to use in service of national security. Through the staging area, she could see Agent Webb being escorted to a vehicle by his supervisors, his career likely ending in disciplinary action and forced retirement. The man who dismissed her expertise and refused her tactical guidance was paying the price for leadership that prioritized ego over competence. The contrast wasn't lost on her. While Webb faced consequences for his failures, she was being offered recognition and opportunity based on her demonstrated abilities. The same people who'd questioned her qualifications were now acknowledging that she possessed exactly what dangerous situations required. Agent Chen placed a hand on her shoulder. Whatever you decide about those orders, I want you to know that you saved my life tonight, and Martinez's life, and everyone else who was trapped in that canyon because our leadership couldn't see past their own assumptions. Aria nodded, still processing the evening's events. In the span of 4 hours, she'd gone from bride to warrior to candidate for the most classified operations her government conducted. The perfect wedding day had become something entirely different, but perhaps something more important. As she prepared to make the most significant decision of her military career, she thought about Senator Hayes, safe now because someone had been willing to act when official channels failed. Sometimes that was what service really meant, being ready to step forward when others couldn't or wouldn't, regardless of recognition or personal cost.
2 weeks later, Aria stood in the same briefing room at Cliffside Gardens Resort where her wedding reception had taken place. But everything about the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. The elegant venue had been temporarily converted into a secure conference facility for a joint task force meeting that brought together representatives from multiple federal agencies. The irony wasn't lost on her. The same location where Captain Sullivan had spent an evening lecturing about military leadership was now hosting a classified briefing where she would present tactical recommendations to some of the most senior counterterrorism officials in the government. Lucas sat in the back of the room, wearing a visitor's badge that identified him as the spouse of an active duty service member. Their honeymoon had been postponed indefinitely when Aria accepted the recall to active duty, but he'd insisted on attending today's briefing to better understand the choice his wife had made on their wedding night. Ladies and gentlemen, Director Martinez announced to the assembled group, I'd like to begin today's session by recognizing the exceptional performance that led to the successful recovery of Senator Hayes and the neutralization of a significant terrorist cell. She gestured toward Aria, who stood at attention in her dress uniform, the ribbons on her chest now including a newly awarded Distinguished Service Cross for her actions during the hostage rescue. Staff Sergeant Kane's tactical expertise and leadership under pressure prevented what could have been a catastrophic loss of American life and classified intelligence. Her performance that night demonstrated capabilities that our current operational structure was unable to provide. Agent Chen, now wearing the insignia of a newly promoted senior special agent, stepped forward with a folder containing the official after-action report. Ma'am, the joint investigation has confirmed that the kidnapping cell was indeed the same group responsible for 3 previous attacks on American diplomatic facilities. Intelligence recovered from the site has already prevented 2 additional planned operations. Captain Sullivan, who had requested permission to attend the briefing, sat in the front row with an expression that mixed respect with obvious embarrassment. Over the past 2 weeks, he'd submitted formal recommendations for Aria's promotion and had personally apologized to every officer who'd heard his dismissive comments at the wedding reception. Staff Sergeant Kane, Director Martinez continued, "Your tactical innovations during the extraction have been incorporated into updated training protocols for both FBI hostage rescue teams and military special operations units. The drainage channel approach you utilized is now part of standard curriculum at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center." Major Thompson stepped forward with another set of orders. "Kane, effective immediately, you're promoted to Master Sergeant and assigned as Senior Tactical Advisor to Joint Task Force Omega, a new unit specifically created to handle high-value extractions that require your particular skill set." The promotion represented more than just rank advancement. It was official recognition that her expertise was not only valued, but essential for future operations. The same capabilities that had been dismissed as inadequate for real military operations were now considered so valuable that an entire task force had been created around them. Lucas watched from the back of the room as his wife accepted commendations and assignments that would define the next phase of her military career. His expression was complicated, mixing pride with concern about what their future would look like. After the formal briefing concluded, the various officials dispersed to continue classified discussions that Aria would soon be fully briefed on. She approached Lucas, still wearing her dress uniform, but with the relaxed posture of someone who was finally off duty. "So," Lucas said quietly, "this is what our life looks like now." "This is what my career looks like now," Aria corrected gently. "Our life is still what we make it." "Aria, they're talking about sending you to places I've never heard of, to do things they can't tell me about. How is that different from what you were doing before?" She considered his question carefully, understanding the fear behind his words. "Before, I was following orders and hoping that someone recognized my capabilities. Now I'm in a position to make decisions that can actually save lives. There's a difference between being deployed and being essential." Agent Chen approached them with a warm smile. Her own transformation over the past 2 weeks was evident in her increased confidence and authority. "Master Sergeant Kane, I wanted to thank you again for everything. The training protocols you've developed have already been implemented at Quantico. How are your teammates recovering?" "Martinez is back to full duty. Williams starts physical therapy next week. Both of them specifically requested assignment to Task Force Omega if positions become available." She paused, looking between Aria and Lucas. "They want to work with someone who actually knows what they're doing."
After Chen left, Lucas and Aria walked toward the resort's garden terrace, where their wedding reception had taken place. The evening lighting created the same magical atmosphere, but everything else had changed irrevocably. "I need you to understand something," Aria said as they reached the spot where they'd exchanged their first dance as a married couple. "What happened that night wasn't about proving a point or showing off. Senator Hayes was going to die if someone didn't act." "I know. And I'm proud of what you accomplished, but I'm also terrified about what comes next. The same thing that's always come next. Someone, somewhere, is going to need help that only a few people are qualified to provide. Sometimes I'll be one of those people." Lucas nodded slowly, processing the reality of being married to someone whose skills made her indispensable for the most dangerous missions her government conducted. "The night of our wedding, when you changed into that tactical gear, I barely recognized you. You became someone I'd never seen before." "I became who I've always been," Aria corrected. "I just had to hide it for so long that even you forgot what I was capable of." From the terrace, they could see Captain Sullivan's vehicle pulling away from the resort. Over the past 2 weeks, he'd made genuine efforts to understand and acknowledge his previous mistakes, but the damage to his reputation had been significant. Several junior officers had requested transfers away from his command, citing concerns about leadership that prioritized assumptions over evidence. "There's something I need to tell you," Lucas said finally. "That night, When you left to help with the rescue, I was angry. Not just worried, but actually angry that you were choosing duty over our wedding. And now? Now I understand that you weren't choosing duty over our wedding. You were choosing to be the person I fell in love with, someone who steps forward when others can't or won't. Aria felt something ease in her chest that she hadn't realized had been tense since the night of their wedding. Lucas's support meant more than any official recognition or military commendation. The assignments I'll be taking, they're dangerous. More dangerous than anything I did during my previous deployments. I need you to understand what you're signing up for. I'm signing up for a life with someone who saves people. Someone who doesn't walk away when lives are at stake. If that means worrying about you more than I'd like, then that's what marriage to a hero looks like. As twilight settled over the coastal venue, Aria thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From dismissed diversity hire to essential specialist, from retired veteran to active duty master sergeant leading the most classified operations her government conducted. The wedding reception that had been interrupted by terrorism had ultimately become the foundation for a career that would define her contributions to national security. The same people who'd questioned her qualifications now depended on her expertise for missions that no one else was qualified to handle. "Master Sergeant Kane?" came Major Thompson's voice from behind them. "I hate to interrupt, but we've received intelligence about a situation in Eastern Europe that requires immediate assessment." Aria turned toward her commanding officer, already shifting into operational mode. "Timeline?" "Briefing in 1 hour. Possible deployment within 24 hours." Lucas squeezed Aria's hand, understanding that their quiet moment together was ending. "Go save someone else," he said with a smile that mixed love with resignation. "I'll be here when you get back." As Aria walked toward the briefing that would define her next mission, she reflected on how completely her life had changed since that evening 2 weeks ago. She'd gone from planning a peaceful civilian future to accepting responsibility for the most demanding operations her government conducted. But more importantly, she'd finally found her place in a world that had spent years telling her she didn't belong. The token officer was gone, replaced by exactly what dangerous situations required. Someone who never gave up, never backed down, and never left anyone behind. The doubters had been proven wrong, not through arguments or politics, but through competence demonstrated when everything was on the line. Sometimes that was all it took. One moment when skill mattered more than assumptions, when results spoke louder than prejudice. Staff Sergeant Viper Kane had become Master Sergeant Aria Kane, leader of the most elite extraction unit in the American military. And somewhere in the darkness ahead, people who didn't even know her name were depending on her to bring them home safely. That was exactly where she belonged. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.